Welcome, insomniacs and thrill seekers, to your new nightmare. Do you ever feel a prickle on the back of your neck? A sense that something unseen watches you from the shadows? Do you hear whispers in the dead of night? Whispers that promise chilling secrets? We all have those moments, those times when the veil between reality and the terrifying unknown seems paper thin. Here, on this channel, we delve into those moments, those unsettling stories that lurk just beneath the surface. We'll explore the darkness that lives in abandoned asylums, the malevolent entities that haunt ancient forests, and the bone-chilling encounters that plague everyday lives. So, gather close, light a candle if you dare, because tonight, we're going to make you afraid of everything.
Heather scowled, her eyes glued to the well-worn paperback. Parties? Not a chance. Texting? Pass. Makeup? Ditto. Pretty enough, she muttered, a flicker of doubt crossing her mind despite the constant reassurances. Maybe that's why her friends, a motley crew of interesting souls, tolerated her sharp tongue. A shiver ran down her spine as the clock ticked toward the witching hour, Halloween night. The shrill ring of her phone shattered the quiet. Groaning, she recognized the caller ID, Mark, the self-proclaimed social butterfly of the group. He was the one who herded them, made plans, the unofficial leader, even if he denied it. Yeah, she answered, a bite in her voice. Introverts like Heather craved solitude, and phone calls were the bane of her existence. Texts or face-to-face interactions were far more tolerable. Mark, bless his persistent heart, knew this yet persisted in calling. Trying to get under my skin again, Mark, she grumbled. That infuriatingly calm voice, did the guy ever lose his cool? She tried everything to keep him at bay initially, but his relentless positivity had worn her down. A begrudging friendship had formed, and Heather couldn't deny her life had become more vibrant with him around. Though admitting that? Never. Halloween, huh? Can't a girl get some peace around here? Heather muttered with a frown. Mark's voice crackled through the phone. Nope, he chirped, but it's way more fun with your sarcastic wit along for the ride. Who else will keep Kelsey grounded and John in check? Heather rolled her eyes, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. Alone time was her jam, but this little friend group had grown on her. Don't worry, I have a killer night planned. Remember your love for spooky reads? Tonight's your night. He wasn't wrong. In theory, this should be her ideal night. But crowds and forced interactions? No thanks. Still, Heather sighed, a low rumble in her chest. Fine, she conceded, I'll be waiting. Excitement crackled in Mark's voice. Awesome. See you in 30. Heather figured their hangout was on their route. Perfect. Earlier, she'd chosen her costume, Valak from The Nun. A quick shower, some clothes wrangling, and a dash of makeup later, she was transformed into the chilling villain from Conjuring 2. It wasn't elaborate, just enough to shroud her face in anonymity. Not that anyone would recognize her anyway, but a little extra mystery never hurt. The doorbell chimed, startling her as she perfected the final touches. The doorbell's shrill cry echoed through the house. Heather, your freak show of friends is here, her dad boomed from downstairs. Heather smirked, adding the final touches to her Valak makeup. Coming, she called back. Downstairs, her dad's jaw dropped. What in the... He sputtered, staring at her full costume. Heather chuckled, used to his dramatics. Nice costume, honey, her mom offered with a playful nudge. Calm down, Gary, it's Halloween. You know she lives for this horror stuff. Her dad sighed, muttering something about needing a stronger drink. Have a good time, pumpkin, he mumbled, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Heather understood his discomfort. They were Catholic after all, and her dad wore his faith on his sleeve. See you later, Dad, she chirped, offering a quick hug. The front door opened to reveal Mark, a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. Before him stood Heather's dad, radiating disapproval. Bring her back in one piece, Mark, he boomed, his voice laced with mock seriousness. She's our only child, you know? Heather rolled her eyes at her dad's usual routine of trying to intimidate Mark. John and Kelvin snickered from behind Mark. Stepping outside, Heather greeted them with a flat, "Hey." John, ever the charmer, quipped, "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence." Debbie Downer strikes again. Heather shot back a witty retort, "Better a downer than a jerk, wouldn't you say?" It was a familiar dance, their playful insults. Despite their differences, they'd formed a bond, an oddball family of sorts. Heather suspected it was Mark's doing. He possessed an uncanny ability to connect with anyone as long as they weren't complete duds. "Whoa, nice costume, Heather." Kelvin offered, a genuine smile spreading across his face. Heather appreciated his easygoing nature. He never took her barbs personally, making him a comfortable friend to be around. Sure, he lacked ambition, but Heather wasn't exactly Miss Career Woman herself. At least she had started thinking about the future, thanks in no small part to Mark's influence. John, ever the instigator, barked a playful insult at Kelvin, who simply shrugged it off. "Enough, you two," Kelsey chimed in, his voice a steady drone. Despite Heather's superficial streak, she valued Kelsey's kindness and loyalty. He and Mark were practically joined at the hip, the longest-standing members of their little group. Heather liked to tease Mark about secretly dating Kelsey, but he always shot it down. Mark, ever the leader, rallied the group. "All right, everyone, let's move out." "Where to?" John questioned. A mischievous glint flickered in Mark's eyes. "Surprise," he declared, "but trust me, it'll be spooky." Their trek led them to a familiar sight, the abandoned haunted house on the outskirts of town. Whispers of disturbing incidents had turned it from a Halloween attraction into a local pariah. Rumors even swirled about missing teenagers, though nothing concrete had ever surfaced. Heather's parents, naturally wary with their strong spiritual beliefs, had warned her off the place. Ironically, its location near their house made it more convenient than for the others. A hesitant question escaped Heather's lips. "Wait, Mark, is this?" He confirmed her suspicion with a confident nod. "We're going to check it out for ourselves. Parents love to scare us kids, right? Mine never even brought me here." Besides, he added excitedly, "they're closed for good now, but haven't hauled everything away yet. Perfect chance for a peek." John wasn't entirely convinced. "Maybe there's a reason for that missing kid story," he mumbled. Kelsey, ever the voice of reason, interjected, "Allegedly missing. Nothing ever came of it." Heather found herself grappling with a strange concern. "Ugh, are we really worried about cobwebs in my hair right now?" she thought, shaking her head. This was the legendary haunted house, and they were going in on Halloween night. Talk about a story for the ages. Kelvin, ever the wild card, chimed in, "Maybe we can find the missing kid and give his family closure." His deadpan delivery made it hard to tell if he was serious. Heather wasn't sure about the whole plan. A tremor of doubt ran through her. Maybe entering the house wasn't the brightest idea. But then again, wasn't facing her fear the whole point? Perhaps a peek inside would demystify the place, revealing just Halloween theatrics. Mark, sensing her hesitation, cut in, "Heather, trust me?" John, the resident contrarian, groaned, "Oh brother, here we go with the hero speech." He was the only one, besides Heather, voicing reservations. Heather nodded, her voice firm. "Yeah, I do." There was no denying her trust in Mark. "Then believe me," Mark continued, his voice earnest, "there's nothing truly scary in there. Sure, it's creepy and atmospheric, but that's just the spooky stories playing tricks on our minds and the design meant to scare. Aren't you at least a little curious? Wouldn't it be awesome to debunk the rumors and see it for what it really is?" He had a way with words, a genuine conviction that was infectious. John even seemed to waver. "Damn," he muttered. Mark was their planner, the one they trusted. Why break the pattern now? Heather sighed. "All right, let's do it." A wave of relief washed over Mark and Kelsey. They exchanged a triumphant high five. "Great. Here's the plan," Mark announced, his voice brimming with excitement. "We'll sneak in through the back. I managed to jimmy open the gate, and there's a clear path leading to the house." "Sound good?" A chorus of cool echoed in response. Unfamiliar thrills coursed through Heather's veins, a stark contrast to her usual routine. Tonight felt different, and a delicious premonition whispered that it would be unforgettable. The moment they entered the compound, a heavy silence settled over them. An oppressive atmosphere hung in the air, prickling Heather's skin with unease. A primal urge to flee tugged at her, and judging by her friends' stiff postures, they weren't immune either. But seeing Mark press forward, a determined glint in his eyes gave her a flicker of courage. "Well, past the point of no return now," John muttered, attempting a playful lilt to his voice that didn't quite mask the underlying tension. He even threw in a spooky ghost impression, earning an eye roll from Heather. They squeezed through an unlocked window, the act itself a transgression into the forbidden. The air inside felt different, charged with an unseen energy. A shiver ran down Heather's spine. Was this place truly haunted? Or was it simply her imagination, fueled by the creepy atmosphere? Anyone else feel a shift in the air? Kelvin asked, his voice barely a whisper. Nervous glances exchanged between them confirmed they all shared the unsettling sensation. Heather, trying to sound braver than she felt, suggested maybe we should just head back now, but the response was a chorus of skeptical looks. Mark, ever the leader, took charge. "All right, let's explore the main hall first, then work our way outwards. And stay together, no wandering off." John scoffed. Mr. Fearless himself seems to be having second thoughts. "There's a difference between fear and caution," Mark countered. "Getting lost in here wouldn't be fun. We need to be smart," says the one who dragged us here in the first place. John retorted. Mark sighed, his exasperation evident. "Look, I just wanted a bit of spooky fun, some adventure. Can't we lighten up?" Their bickering was abruptly cut short by a scurrying sound. In the blink of an eye, Mark fell silent, Kelsey shrieked, and Heather jumped, more startled by the scream than whatever had scurried past. A tense silence followed, broken only by nervous laughter bubbling up from each of them. The adrenaline rush from the unknown, the mix of fear and exhilaration, it was unlike anything Heather had ever experienced. A slow understanding dawned on her. Perhaps this was the kind of excitement Mark had envisioned for them all along. Kelsey sheepishly apologized for her scream, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. "Don't worry about it," Mark reassured her with a grin. "All part of the spooky fun. A little scare is to be expected, but ultimately there's nothing to be truly afraid of." The incident seemed to lighten the mood. Heather found herself genuinely enjoying their exploration with the group. Sure, there were creepy mannequins and unsettling decorations, but nothing that sent shivers down her spine. Kelsey's jump scares were more entertaining than genuinely frightening. John, ever the prankster, couldn't resist taking a jab at Kelsey. He let out a blood-curdling yell as they exited the house, sending her scrambling in mock terror. "You jerk, Mathers." Kelsey swatted him playfully, using his last name in mock annoyance. Heather and Kelvin chuckled, clearly enjoying the camaraderie and John's playful torment of Kelsey. Suddenly, Mark's voice cut through the air, laced with concern. "That's strange. The back gate is wide open, not how I left it." John shrugged. "Wind must have blown it open, or maybe one of us forgot to latch it." "No biggie, let's just get out of here." Kelsey echoed his sentiment, eager to leave. They exited through the back gate and found themselves on the deserted street. The quiet wasn't unusual given the house's remote location, but tonight it felt unsettlingly oppressive. "Is it just me, or are there fewer streetlights than before?" Mark questioned, voicing Heather's growing unease. She cast a glance around, her memory confirming his observation. The once illuminated path was now shrouded in an unnatural darkness. "Let's just pick up the pace, okay?" Heather urged, a tremor in her voice. The wind seemed to pick up in response, howling through the deserted streets with an eerie intensity. With every step, a sense of foreboding tightened its grip on her. The wind's mournful song morphed into unsettling whispers, or perhaps it was just her imagination playing tricks. One moment it seemed to murmur secrets, the next it carried a darker, more menacing tone. Heather envisioned a reunion, a desperate escape together. But as she burst into a clearing, a wave of crushing disappointment washed over her. Kelsey stood alone, face streaked with tears, her frantic cries echoing unanswered. No Mark, no John. Disappointment morphed into a cold dread. Perhaps they'd written Kelsey off, decided she was a goner. Maybe in their shoes, Heather would have done the same. But the thought of abandoning Kelsey, of leaving her friend to that horrifying fate, filled Heather with a fierce resolve. Saving herself seemed impossible, but saving Kelsey, that was a fight she had to take. Relief washed over Kelsey's face as she spotted Heather. "Thank God, you're alive. We have to get out of here, they're coming." Heather gripped her friend's arm, panic clawing at her throat. "Where are we going?" she gasped. Her plan, flimsy as it was, relied on finding Mark and John. They knew the way back, but before they could formulate a new one, a horrifying creature lunged at them. Did these things never tire? "Run!" Heather screamed, dragging Kelsey along. Kelsey, however, stumbled, fatigue hindering her movements. "Come on, Kelsey, keep up." Heather pleaded, only to be silenced by a horrifying spectacle. One clean swipe with an invisible weapon, and Kelsey was cleaved in two, collapsing in a spray of blood. A guttural snarl ripped from the creature's maw as it advanced on Heather, its eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. But just as despair threatened to consume her, a figure emerged from the shadows, John, wielding a massive tree branch. He slammed it into the creature's face, momentarily staggering the beast. Mark materialized beside him, a makeshift weapon clutched in his hand. "This way," he yelled, grabbing Heather's hand and pulling her forward. Barely phased it, John grunted, frustration lacing his voice. Heather, speechless with shock, could only manage a whispered question as they fled. You came back for me?" Mark, his voice breathless, offered an explanation. "Technically, we came for Kelsey. We figured you'd be together. But listen, we need to reach the haunted house. Somehow, we've entered an alternate reality, a haunted one. This town is teeming with those things." Heather's guilt gnawed at her. "I never meant to drag you into this. Who could have predicted this nightmare?" Mark pressed on, urgency lacing his words. "The way out might be the way in. If we return to the house and leave again, maybe the spell, or whatever twisted magic this is, will break. We all felt a shift when we entered, right? That's my hope. Besides, we're out of options. This town seems deserted. Maybe they're all ready." He trailed off, the implication heavy. "You know the way back?" John rasped. Mark nodded grimly. "Yeah." John surveyed the desolate street. "Those things are slow, thankfully, but strong. Our attacks barely fazed them. Driven by adrenaline and terror, they sprinted towards the looming silhouette of the haunted house. They burst through a back entrance and raced for the window they'd escaped through earlier. "Ladies first," Mark gestured, his voice strained. "No, you go," Heather countered. John's patience snapped. "Enough. This isn't the time for niceties." He scrambled through the window, his voice echoing back, "Don't waste time arguing. Monsters are on our heels." Mark ushered Heather forward. As she clambered onto the windowsill, the wind howled, carrying the chilling sounds of pursuit. Were those things eliminating everyone in this twisted reality? Or was panic clouding her judgment? "This is all my fault," Heather choked out, tears blurring her vision. "You have to go first, Mark. I couldn't live with myself if it..." Mark cut her off, his voice tight. "Don't argue. Go." Overcome with guilt and terror, Heather scrambled through the window. A sickening crunch and Mark's strangled cry froze her blood. She dared not look back, her body propelled forward by blind panic. Claws dug into her leg, searing pain jolting her. Almost through, she felt a desperate shove from behind. "Go, Heather!" Mark's scream ripped through the night. She twisted, a glimpse of Mark grappling with the monstrous figures before they swarmed him. A horrifying shriek, then silence. Heather's scream echoed in the empty house as she collapsed onto the floor, the world tilting on its axis. John rushed to her side, his face etched with a mixture of grief and fury. "What happened? Where's Mark?" His voice bounced off the walls, unanswered. Heather could only stare numbly at the window, a hollow ache spreading through her chest. No monstrous shapes lurked outside. The house, once a vessel of playful terror, now felt like a tomb. Mark's last words echoed in her mind, a desperate plea that confirmed his theory. They were back in their reality. But at what cost? Grief choked John's voice as he roared, a primal scream laced with blame. Heather, spent and broken, could only whimper, a stark counterpoint to his rage. The haunted house, once a place of amusement, now held the echoes of their worst nightmare. Kelsey, who had been uncharacteristically quiet for a while, finally broke the silence. "I really don't want to be here anymore. Can we please go home?" John's sharp question halted them in their tracks. "Wait, who are they?" His voice cut through the tension as they all pivoted towards the source of his alarm. In the distance, shrouded in the unnatural darkness, stood 7 figures. The figures were too far away to discern any details, but their presence sent a jolt of fear through Heather. "Hey, what's the big deal?" Kelvin called out, oblivious to the tension gripping the others. "Relax, guys." Mark shot him a worried look. "Kelvin, this isn't a joke. Things have gotten strange since we left the house. We should His voice was cut short by Kelvin's sudden movement. He turned back, a confused frown etched on his face, just as one of the figures wound up for a throw. "Run!" Kelsey shrieked. "They're going to attack." "Don't be ridiculous," Kelvin scoffed, ever the skeptic. "They're probably just messing with us." But his nonchalance evaporated as the remaining figures mimicked the first, their throws devoid of any object. John, his bravado finally cracking, yelled, "We're not scared of you, jerks." Kelvin began, but his sentence died in his throat. In a horrifying display of violence, his head erupted in a spray of crimson as if an invisible spear had pierced it. Blood splattered across the faces of his horrified friends. Kelsey's scream tore through the night. Heather, frozen in shock, watched the scene unfold in slow motion. Her mind struggled to comprehend the grotesque tableau before her. John's voice, laced with terror, echoed, "What the hell? A metal spear? But I can't see anything." Mark, his face etched with grim determination, grabbed Heather's arm. "It doesn't matter what it is," he rasped. "We need to get out of here. Now. This isn't normal. Get Kelsey, I have Heather." Heather felt herself being dragged along, her legs numb with terror. The attackers wound up again, their silent throes a chilling harbinger of further violence. The world seemed to shrink, the sounds of her friends' screams and the stranger's guttural voices fading into a distant hum. All she could hear was the frantic pounding of her heart and the ragged gasps escaping her constricted throat. Panic constricted her lungs, making every breath a struggle. With a desperate effort, Heather forced her gaze to flit across the scene, the lifeless body, her terrified friends, the relentless attackers. A surge of primal fear jolted her back to reality. She knew they wouldn't stop. If she didn't act, they would all be next. Heather forced her breaths to slow, the world sharpening around her. The attackers hurled their invisible weapons, thankfully missing. The thuds of impact confirmed their formless nature. "Where in God's name are we?" John rasped, dragging a whimpering Kelsey behind him. A flicker of guilt crossed his face as he glanced back at Kelvin's crumpled form. They'd had no choice. They plunged into the bushes, the dense foliage offering more protection than the deserted streets. Alternate dimension? Aliens? Silence. Mark hissed, his voice tight with urgency. "We don't know who those things were, but we need to vanish." They pushed deeper into the woods, lungs burning, until the sounds of pursuit faded. Heather remained silent, a tremor running through her. Though her breathing had eased, a knot of terror remained lodged in her throat. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Heather!" Mark's voice broke through the haze. He cupped her face, concern etching lines on his forehead. "Are you all right?" Heather's mind reeled, struggling to grasp the brutal reality. "Kelvin!" Her voice choked on a sob, a cheese. Mark met her gaze, his voice steady. "Look at me, Heather. We need to breathe. Slow, deep breaths, just like this." He demonstrated, and slowly a semblance of calm seeped back into her. The constricting grip on her throat loosened, allowing her to speak. "Kelvin, he's dead," she whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Confusion and terror warred within Kelsey. "What's happening? Where are we?" she stammered, her voice laced with panic. John hissed back, a dark edge to his voice. "Shut up, Kelsey. You trying to get us all killed?" Mark, ever the voice of reason, interjected. "Hey," yelling at her won't help. "Running isn't the answer either. We need a plan." "A freaking plan for what?" John shot back, frustration, and fear bubbling over. Where the hell are we supposed to run to? Mark, his brow furrowed in concentration, spoke in a low voice. This all started after we left the abandoned house. Maybe if we... His sentence was cut short as John, fueled by grief and rage, lashed out. With a sickening thud, John's fist connected with Mark's jaw, sending him sprawling to the ground. Heather gasped, the sound lost in the rising tide of John's fury. "So it's your fault, huh, Mark?" he roared. "You dragged us into this mess. You got Kelvin killed." Heather, her voice trembling, tried to reason with him. "John, what are you doing?" Mark, regaining his composure, spoke quickly. "First, John, shut up. We don't know if those things are still out there, and they could be close. We need to conserve our energy for another run. Second, they're not human. They can make things invisible, and we couldn't even see their features. And third, you really think I would have dragged you all here if I knew this would happen? We need to focus on getting out of this alive before." But John, consumed by grief and rage, charged at Mark, intent on another blow. "John, stop!" Heather cried, throwing herself between them. Suddenly, a new wave of terror ripped through the group. Kelsey's scream pierced the night, her arm outstretched, pointing into the darkness. They followed her gaze to see a horrifying sight, the 7 monstrous figures, like shadows come to life, charging towards them. This wasn't just a nightmare anymore, it was a real-life horror show. Mark's desperate yell, "Oh God, everyone run. Back to the house, I have a plan," echoed through the night. Heather didn't hesitate. Though lost in the maze of deserted streets, she sprinted after Mark, fueled by adrenaline and blind terror. John, a blur of anger and fear, shot past her. The sound of Kelsey's screams clawed at her sanity, proof she wasn't alone. But another sound chilled her, a menacing howl that seemed to ride the wind. Those things, they were after them. Heather hadn't gotten a clear look, but she knew they weren't human. Humanoid shapes, yes, but devoid of humanity. Were they the Walking Dead? No, they'd thrown spears? Invisible spears. A grotesque combination of the living and dead, radiating a chilling aura that fueled her frantic escape. Her worst fear materialized: separation. One wrong turn and she'd lost sight of the others. Paths were non-existent, so she plunged into the undergrowth, branches scraping at her skin, thorns tearing at her clothes. A choked sob threatened to escape, but she bit her lip, forcing silence. Scream and attract them? No way. No man's land lived up to its name. Lost, alone, and consumed by dread, Heather stumbled deeper into the desolate wilderness. Panic gnawed at her. Mark and John were gone, swallowed by the darkness. A strangled sob escaped her lips. What if they were searching for her only to face those monstrous attackers? Despair threatened to overwhelm her, but a flicker of hope remained. Kelsey's screams. The piercing shrieks served as a beacon, a morbid compass pointing towards her friend and likely their pursuers. Heather steeled herself. A plan, flimsy but desperate, flickered into existence. "There you are," she yelled, forcing a note of cheer into her voice. Ignoring the throbbing pain in her scratched legs, she sprinted towards the sound. Kelsey's screams grew louder, laced with terror.